Stay up to date on the latest political news this election season for less. Visit inforum.news/port and get 3 months of unlimited access to our news network for only 99 cents a month. Subscribe now at inforum.news/port. This podcast is brought to you by the North Dakota Petroleum Foundation. From heating our homes and powering our vehicles to cell phones, clothing, and medical equipment, oil and natural gas makes everyday life better. North Dakota Oil and Natural Gas, advancing the possibilities. Learn more at ndpetroleumfoundation.org. Forum Communications Company is proud to be a part of the Trust Project. Learn more at thetrustproject.org. Welcome to Plain Talk, and hey, I know all of you have been, well, I'm sure you've been following this gas price debate, and let's be honest, we talk a lot about gas prices because they're probably in the galaxy of consumer prices that we all pay, the price of milk, the price of bread, or whatever. Gas prices are probably the most visible, and I think draw, I want to say disproportionate amount of attention, but we pay a lot of attention, probably because they post the prices right along every road that you drive by. They're everywhere. So when the prices go up, man, it's very, very visible. And also it matters. I mean, listen, we all got to get to work. We got to get the kids to school and to daycare. We got to do all those things. A certain amount of travel is optional, but at the end of the day, a certain amount is not. And so when gas prices go up, we don't have a lot of flexibility in terms of what we use. Now, one of the reasons why this has become such a hot button issue is President Joe Biden has been talking a lot about, well, everybody in politics has been talking a lot about this, but President Joe Biden issued a, I don't know what you want to call it, a statement that he posted on Twitter asking gas stations to bring down gas prices. So I wanted to talk with somebody who actually runs a gas station. Joining me, along with Chad Oban, who of course is always my co-host on Wednesdays, is Kent Satrang, who is the president, the head honcho at Petroserve USA, which has locations, several locations in North Dakota and Minnesota. Kent, welcome to the show, and happy to have you on.
Yeah, thank you for asking me to be on.
Let me read you the statement. Now, this is from the president's official Twitter account. He wrote this, and this was just before the holiday, on July 2nd. He wrote, I quote, "My message to the companies running gas stations and setting prices at the pump is simple. This is a time of war and global peril. Bring down the price you are charging at the pump to reflect the cost you're paying for the product, and do it now." When you heard, I'm assuming you heard that message, Kent, and when you did, tell us what your reaction is.
Well, it was really very disappointing. President Biden doesn't seem to understand what it takes to run a business, and he sure doesn't understand what it takes to run a gas station or a convenience store. He seems to think that we can drop the prices, 20 cents in order to be patriotic. And, he's charging 23 cents a gallon for road tax on fuel. At the end of the year, a gas station this last year, we made 4.3 cents per gallon profit. And the year before, pre-pandemic, 2019, we made like 3.2 cents per gallon profit. So there's no price gouging going on by gas stations. Mom and pop gas stations, if you have one store and you sell like 600,000 gallons and you make, somewhere around 2 to 5 cents, you're going to make somewhere around $12,000 to $30,000 at the end of the year profit. If you have a great store that sells 6 million, or maybe two good stores that sell 3 million each, you'll make 300,000 to 120,000. And if you have a chain like Petroserve has the Petroserve stores in Valley Dairy, and let's say you sell 50, 60 million gallons, you might make somewhere between $1 and $3 million. So it is not. I mean, it's really a penny's business. It's economies of scale. And so to say that we could drop our price by whatever he would imagine, 20 to 30 cents, is just very irresponsible and doesn't understand our business. To vilify mom and pop gas station owners is really sad, when it's really been his own policies that have caused this.
Yeah, Kent, one of my frustrations with the discussions about gas prices is everybody's desire to blame other people for the gas prices going up. I'm gonna just straightforward question. I mean, your margin at gas stations, I assume, is the same, regardless of what you're getting the gas for wholesale. Correct? I mean, you're not, if prices are down for the product you're getting, I mean, your margin stays the same. I mean, you pass that on to consumers, correct?
Well, the price is set, like Rob said, with sign language. Everybody puts their price on the sign. So, and if one person is 20 cents less than the other, they've got all kinds of business. And the guy across the street who is 20 cents higher, he or she doesn't have any business. So the price is pretty much the same for all stations in a community, and we all buy it for pretty much the same price. When the price goes high, gas stations don't like it because your credit card fees that are 2.5% on a $2 sale, that's 5 cents. If gas goes to $5, 2.5% now becomes 12.5 cents per gallon. So gas stations don't like high prices because of the credit card fees.
Kent, you also mentioned that it's Biden's policies and that Biden charges 23 cents. Well, that's the federal gas tax. So I think it's hard to put that just on the president. But I do want your opinion on the gas tax holiday idea. I've heard really, really mixed reviews. I mean, it seems like a good idea on paper, but if all that is pushing up the demand, I don't think that really helps us in the long term. What are your thoughts on the federal gas tax holiday, if that makes sense, to sort of get us through this tough part?
Well, I would agree with you, Chad. I don't think it's a good idea because we need roads and bridges repaired. So to not charge the gas tax, and again, that would increase the take away some of the demand destruction that we're seeing with $4.50. I think you're always better off to let the market play out itself, and don't. I think taking away the gas tax would be a very bad idea.
Ken, when it's really interesting to me when you're talking about mom and pop gas station stores, and that's actually something that I've learned in probably the last year or so as we've been talking about this, is how many gas stations really are small businesses. Like maybe it's like somebody who just owns one location, or maybe just owns a handful of locations. I think sometimes we have a misperception of gas stations because we drive by and we see some very big brand names, stuck on the side. We see like an Exxon or something like that on the gas stations, and we assume, these are huge chains like McDonald's. And the reality is, I was reading, I think like half of the 100,000 or so gas stations in America are owned by small businesses. Am I right? I mean, can speak to that a little bit. What does your industry really look like in terms of the sort of people who are running these gas stations?
Yeah, I think nationwide, I think it's more like 75% are owned by mom and pops. And what you see is like the Exxon station or the Scenic station or Marathon. We partner up with them, and they agree to provide us product in short times and long inventory times. We secure supply by putting a Marathon sign up, and they do give us a 1 or 2 cent a gallon kickback at the end of the year for flying their sign. But yeah, it looks like it's all Marathon stores or all Scenic stores, but they're actually all independently. A lot of them are independently owned. You have certain chains like Casey's, where they may have 2,500 stores, or Holiday, if you remember when they were in business, have now been bought out by a big conglomerate. But yeah, for the most part, it's small stores, and they've been hit by inflation from, just like every business, from every direction you can imagine. And that's driven up their costs. In the gasoline business, what's happened is, we probably needed 20 cents a gallon to break even. And of that, a nickel of it went to the credit card fees. And then, of course, COVID hit and the gallons went away because everybody was working from home. That really hasn't come back because a lot of people are still working from home. And then the cost of business has risen so dramatically because of labor costs. We paid people $20 an hour literally to stay home on unemployment. And then when COVID was over, they didn't seem to want to come back to work. So we've had to raise our hourly wage and pay sign-on bonuses and all this stuff. And of course, the cost of transportation and the cost of the ingredients of all the foods for our Cafe USA restaurants that we own, property insurance. I mean, pretty much every cost, healthcare, we've had to pay, we're paying 75% where we used to pay 50% of the people's healthcare costs in order to get them to come back to work. And all those inflationary increased costs are going to get passed on to the consumer in the price of a gallon of gas or a candy bar or one of our tater tot hot dishes that we sell or the cost of pizza. It all gets passed on.
So you brought up some of the different things that you sell at your C stores. What is the sort of percentages of gas sales versus what you sell in the C store in terms of your business, your income coming into an individual like petrol station?
That's a very critical and important question that you asked there, because most gas stations or convenience stores are probably 80% petroleum and 20% inside. And I think, as you know, most of the profits are higher on the inside. So Petroserve, we are about 40% inside sales and 60% petroleum. And of course, that's with our Cafe USA and selling those things like hot dishes and the food offerings that we have and all of the different gift programs we have, the Velvet Elvises and all the trinkets that we sell on the inside. That really has helped, lower our costs needed to break even at the gas pump. But that's a very critical, important point there is we need to be selling stuff on the inside. The profit's really not made on the outside, but most of the sales are on the outside because of $4 a gallon gas times however many gallons you're selling.
When I was trying to book this interview, I actually called a few people in your industry, and I had a little bit of trouble booking somebody because a lot of them didn't want to come on, and their argument was, I don't want to invite criticism from the public. They said, listen, we're the ones that post the gas prices on the sign, and so when gas prices are at a level that are making people unhappy, we're the ones that get the blame. And that certainly seems to be the case where you have President Biden, again, in this tweet, he's blaming you. Like, he's asking you to bring the price down. He's saying, make the price you're charging at the pump reflect the cost you're paying for the product. And he's saying, do it now. So I guess my question for you is, have you experienced like some backlash? I mean, do you get when gas, like whether it's right now or maybe in the past, when gas prices go high, do you get some abuse from the public?
We really don't get a lot because in the Fargo market, I have been on radio for years telling people exactly what we're making for profit. Now, we're a cooperative, so our records are somewhat public, but if you wanted to go on to Casey's General Store, Google them, you'll see all of the same stuff that I'm telling you here. So I was happy to come on your podcast because people need to know, and I think people in our market here know that the actual credit card company makes more profit off their fees than we make selling the gasoline. They're charging 12.5 cents right now, and we're only making 4 cents profit at the end of the year. So credit card fees they're $3 million for our company. So I'm always happy to go on and tell the truth and educate the public rather than President Biden, saying, you need to lower your gas prices by 20 cents. It's not really a very informed statement. It's not possible in our market conditions, especially, in the last few years here. It's gotten worse with inflation.
Yeah, I just want to, as a supporter of President Biden, I want to go on record saying I disagree with him just saying, just lower the gas prices. That's not the way the world works. And I think sometimes we make these things so much simpler than they are. I'm going to transition just slightly to another topic that I'm very interested in. And since I don't get paid to do this podcast, I get to just talk about things I'm interested in. I hope that's okay with you guys.
To be clear, that's all I do as well. And I do get paid.
So
And to be clear, I'm not getting paid either.
yeah, okay. So here we are. Port's getting paid, and the rest of us are just,
Yeah.
part of his big scheme here. So I want to talk about electric vehicles and what it means for your business. I mean, I think as we see the gas prices go much higher, there might be an increase in electric vehicles. And I don't want necessarily your opinion on electric vehicles, but more so what it means for your business. I mean, we just heard from you that 60% of your sales is in gas, 40% is inside. My nephew just bought an electric car, and he was showing me how it works and how long it takes to charge at a charging station. And I was thinking, okay, if you're at a charging station and you charge for 30 minutes, that's a lot of time for me to go into a C-store and buy different products and that kind of thing. Are convenience stores starting to think about that and, putting up charging stations as a way to get people to their facility in order to buy stuff inside the store, even if they're not buying gas?
Well, I can only speak for Petroserve USA, but we're thinking along those lines. That's why we've developed the Cafe USA and all of the little shopping items you can do. So when you are charging, you can go inside and have lunch. And I think that the electric vehicles are probably a number of years down the road for North Dakota because of the cold weather and because of the long distances. I think electric vehicles are a great answer for high pollution areas like Los Angeles. There it makes sense, and you're not driving so far. But I was visiting with someone who said they saw an electric vehicle that was filling. He was from, I think, South Carolina, and he was going across the U.S., and he said it takes him like 2 hours to fill or to charge up so he can go on to the next town. And I'm just thinking that's not a very practical way to travel if you have to stop for 2 hours to charge. But we're hooking up. We're doing the infrastructure underground to hook up for electric charging stations, and I'm sure that will be coming. But there probably isn't more than 125 fully electric vehicles in the state of North Dakota right now.
Yeah, I was just thinking though, the idea of having people, and I think 2 hours is probably a little bit high. What I saw was 30 minutes to go 200 miles or something like that. But just the ability to get people into the store and to buy food and that kind of thing seems like a real opportunity as we likely transition as electric vehicles get a little bit more user-friendly in some parts of the country is what I would say.
I think practical.
Go ahead, Rob.
Well, to Ken's point, I think it has to make sense for consumers, and right now it just doesn't. I said I'm enthusiastic. In fact, last week on Friday, I had Jason Borer on from the Lignite Energy Council talk about somebody who's enthusiastic about electric cars. They're in the electricity production business, so they're super ecstatic about it. But I think it's got a ways to come before it's practical. Especially in our part of the world, but it's coming, and I think that's exciting. Ken, you mentioned that President Biden's kind of blaming gas stations right now for high prices. You're saying that it's President Biden's policies. Now normally I think sometimes we do this sort of round robin of finger pointing when something economically is happening that people don't like, and it obscures the fact that economic trends tend to be very, very complicated. There tend to be a lot of variables, and a lot of times we're just blaming people that are easy to blame that don't necessarily deserve the blame. But in this instance, it's kind of hard to argue that one of the reasons I want to know what your perception is, I guess, as somebody who's on the retail end where the rubber meets the road of the entire gasoline industry. It seems to me like the problem is just that the domestic oil producers don't want, obviously we had the war in Ukraine, which did a number on global markets, but domestic producers in America, I think are reticent to invest right now in oil and gas because we have a Democratic president and a Democratic Congress. It takes years for those investments to pay fruit, and they're worried, the people in power right now want to put them out of business. That's my perception of the problem. Is that accurate? Is that what you see as well?
I think that's a big part of it. I think I wouldn't blame President Biden for all of this, but back in April of 2020, the price of gas was $1.39 in Fargo, and of course that was because we weren't selling very much, so the crude oil price dropped like crazy. And then in May, a year later, the price had doubled to $2.80. And when the war in Ukraine broke out on February 24th, the price was $3.40 a gallon, and today it's $4.50. So it's gone up $2 a gallon since May 2020 to when the war started, and it's gone up $1.20 since that time. So part of it is the war in Russia, and part of it is, I think, policy. But the problem is that the cost of doing business has gone up so much because of inflation and because of people being paid to stay home for unemployment. All those things have really hurt. I mean, I went out for lunch yesterday, and I thought, well, I'll have a cheeseburger. It was $13, and I thought, well, that just seemed a little high. And then I realized, that the pop was going to be probably $3, and that didn't include a side. So if I wanted a salad or I wanted fries, that was another $4. So it's like $21 for a cheeseburger now when you go out to a restaurant. So and restaurants are closing left and right, so they're not getting rich either. So the cost of doing business has gone up so much, and that's what inflation is. And now we've got recession fears, so that's going to bring the prices back down potentially. But we have very high cost of doing business as a result of what's happened in the last 18 months.
Yeah, I think recognizing inflation and the effects of that on everyday consumers is a serious issue. I personally don't have a problem with workers demanding more money. And, we talk about capitalism, we talk about supply and demand, and it seems like often business owners really like supply and demand when they can get labor for cheap. But when the supply of labor isn't what they want it to be, then they complain because it costs too much. Rob, you said it would be difficult for somebody to defend that this is Joe Biden's fault, and I'm going to make my attempt to do that. We talk about the price of gas going up. I mean, we were coming out of COVID. And again, I don't know if supply and demand, if nobody's driving, obviously prices are going to go down because demand is going down. So I think some of the stuff we saw before Ukraine was the natural sort of resetting post-COVID world. The war in Ukraine obviously played a big part in that as well. We talk about domestic oil production. Rob, you and I have talked about this. They can't find workers in Western North Dakota, even if they could pump gas or pump oil on some of these federal lands. So I think, again, we're looking at this in a really simplistic way. It's not just like if all of a sudden we could find enough workers in North Dakota that there wouldn't be more oil being
okay, but the thing is, the oil companies are saying they want those things lifted. The oil companies must feel like they could do something.
But Lynn Helms is saying there's not enough workers to be pumping.
A
lot of these places.
Well, Lynn Helms is a government official and not the oil industry, and doesn't necessarily speak for the oil industry. And all I'm saying is we have an administration in place that has made it clear that they are hostile to the development of oil and gas. Do you agree that far?
So I don't know that I would say hostile. I think that's strong. But what have oil prices, gas prices done around the world, Rob? Is that also Joe Biden's fault? Or is that OPEC?
No, oil is a global market, but the United States of America, Kent's now listening to us argue with each other, but the United States
usually what we do after the guest gets off, not during the guest.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, I'm enjoying it anyway.
Well, the United States of America is the #1 oil producer in the world. So what happens with our domestic production has an outsized impact on the rest of the world. But I mean, the thing is, there's lots of variables. Like I said, the Ukraine war is absolutely a variable. The fact that we have isolated Russia, which is a major exporter of oil and gas, that matters on the global market. All of those things matter. All I'm saying is that if we want to impact prices, then demand is one way supply is one way to do that. And we have an administration and a political party in control of Congress that, again, I think hostile is absolutely the right word. When I listen to some of them speak, they don't want to pump oil anymore. They don't want us to drill or to frack or to do any of those things anymore. And they're wrong. Right?
Well, Rob, I know that I'm not on the level of Nancy Pelosi or Joe Biden, but as a Democrat, I want us to pump that oil. I want those oil tax revenues to come in and pay for our schools and pay for our human services needs and all those other things. Pump that oil. And I'm going to do everything in my power to make other Democrats understand that too.
And I understand that. When I'm saying, I wasn't talking about you specifically, Chad, but I think also yours is the minority point of view in your party. I think maybe we can agree on that. And Ken,
I think it's safe to say, though, isn't it, that America could drill our way out of double-digit inflation? You know, if we had the North Dakota Bakken and Texas Permian Basin bring us back to energy independence and throw in some renewable fuels, I know you like that, Rob. But if you did those things, inflation would pretty much go away.
Kent made that little jab because he and I have had some legendary debates about ethanol in the past, which we won't get into.
Well, I know Rob really likes renewables as long as it's subsidized by the government. That's the kind of
that's what he likes.
What? All right, well, that is false. But we're going to keep going. Kent, when you're hearing this debate, unfold about, I think you're kind of making the same point I do, and it's really interesting to me. You know, if you look at when the Obama-Biden administration came into office in 2009, we were coming out of the 2008 financial collapse. We had some tough sledding with the economy back then, and it was always interesting to me that what kind of drove a lot of the economic recovery in those years. That President Obama in a lot of ways took credit for, and I'm not blaming him for that because the presidents, they get the blame too. They may as well take the credit. But, they took credit for a lot of economic recovery that was driven by the oil and gas industry in North Dakota, but also in places like you mentioned, the Permian and these other places, and also not just oil, but natural gas. And I think that's to your point, Kent, where, making things and supplying things could really help the economy. Now, obviously, what's driving inflation is a lot of complex things, and it's not all on the oil industry. But I think to your point, gosh, it could sure help.
Oh, it sure would, because if you could bring down the price of diesel fuel by actually drilling more and by producing more, that would bring down the cost of transportation for groceries. And oil is used in so many things, plastics, that type of thing. I mean, if you can drill your way out of double-digit inflation, I'm sure. I really believe that. That's what we have to do to get the country back on track, I think. But of course, you have people who want green energy, who are so far to the left, and there's people who want oil who are so far to the right, and of course, there's the problem. You need to get a combination of the two, and we always say it's not a silver bullet, it's a shotgun that's going to solve these problems. It's electric vehicles, it's E85 and ethanol, and it's oil.
I think
so. It's got to be everything.
I think in a lot of ways the electric car situation is kind of a microcosm of this larger thing. I think it works when it works. I think where we run into problems is where we try to impose solutions on the market instead of just setting the guardrails for the market and letting it get to work. I think when we start trying to impose ideology, we're going to try to make everybody use electric cars, maybe even before an electric car makes sense for them. I think that's a foolish policy. We're going to try to make everybody use a certain type of fuel, even if that doesn't make sense. Well,
if you make everybody use an electric car, what do you think electric rates are going to do?
Well, that's the other thing, is our power grid's not ready for that either.
Right.
Kent, I asked you for a half an hour. I think Chad's got maybe one last question. Go ahead, Chad.
Yeah, I just want one last really quick question. I want to go back to gas holiday. I've heard economists say it wouldn't help like with the individual consumers, but one place it could help is with diesel and supply chain issues to help bring down the price a little bit. Even if we would just eliminate that gas tax on diesel for 2, 3, 4 months as we're going through this tough time. Do you think that would make a difference? I'm not suggesting you're an economist, but what are your thoughts on that?
No, I don't really believe that it would make much of a difference. I think that the market has to be in control, and I think because of the fear of recession right now, I think you're going to see diesel and gas prices come down. So I think it will anyway. I mean, gas prices and diesel prices are set by the price of crude oil, by basis, and by geopolitical events. So if the war in Russia would end with Ukraine, if that would end, that would bring prices down. And I think you're going to see crude oil prices come down because of recession potential and people not building homes and businesses and people not because of interest rates and the cost of lumber and cost of labor. And so I think you're going to see prices come back down on their own.
Well, Ken, once again, Ken's business, by the way, is Petroserve USA. You can find them on the internet. They have locations in North Dakota and Minnesota, and you don't have any up in my neck of the woods. So I can't say that I patronize your business regularly, but every time I go to Fargo, I stop in at Petroserve USA.
Well, I appreciate that, Rob.
Ken?
That Petro station, I think, is my favorite gas station in all of North Dakota.
Buy a pizza when you go inside too.
Yeah, I will. Although I'm trying to lose weight, so I'm trying to cut down on convenience store pizzas, but I still indulge myself now and then. Ken, thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, Ken.
Yeah, thank you very much. Good to talk to you guys.
All right, just finished up with Kent Satrang. I think that's an interesting conversation. I think the economics of it are endlessly fascinating. And you made a couple of points about the gas tax holiday. Stuff like that bugs me, mostly because I think it's just window dressing, right? Like the other thing is releasing oil from the strategic reserves and stuff like that. Those don't solve the problem. They're at best they have a very, very minimal impact, because ultimately what moves the needle for our economy is something that is predictable, right? So if you know, okay, well, we're going to get more supply, that's a predictable thing. Not the politicians are going to give us a holiday from this tax for a certain window. No business can plan on that, right? No business can make long-term plans based on that. So, I understand what he's trying to do, but I would much rather them focus on the bigger issues, which I understand are more complicated and harder, but I'd rather them focus on that than this window dressing stuff that's good on Twitter.
I think it's always interesting when conservatives oppose putting money back into consumers' pockets rather than sending it to the government. I understand the desire. I mean, it's not going to fix the long-term problem, but would it add a little bit of relief to the consumer for a short period of time as we're going into schools and that kind of
maybe, but at what cost? I mean, because to me, being a conservative also is responsible budgeting, right? We have roads that need to be repaired. We have a massive budget deficit.
We just put a bunch of money into infrastructure. If you recall, Hoeven and Kramer voted for that. Kelly didn't, and people are now blaming that for the inflation. So maybe we shouldn't be fixing our roads.
A lot of that, a big chunk of that bill wasn't also infrastructure too.
Here we go. Here we go again.
Hey, I supported that bill passing. I'm not, but it's just to say that was only infrastructure is not correct. But even so, I mean that's a one-off thing. A gas tax holiday again. I mean, I don't know that it's a conservative position just to cut every revenue source to the government. And I think you were just saying that you wanted to get into our sometimes shallow politics. I think that's and listen, a lot of conservatives feel that way. I mean, I'm not, I can't defend them because a lot of them think, just cut any tax you find. That's not conservatism. That's not responsible. Balancing the budget is responsible. And boy, our government's budget doesn't balance.
But before we get into the shallowness of politics, I do think, with North Dakota's budget position, to look at a state gas tax holiday or a sales tax holiday for back to school, again, trying to help consumers that are struggling with inflation for the short term. North Dakota is not going to fix inflation, no matter what you saw on TV commercials leading up to the primary. But I think there are some things that we can do to help people struggling to make ends meet because of inflation.
Yeah, I'm not against that in the short term. I would like to get out of the area where we're constantly justifying these things by talking about what an emergent situation we're in. Sometimes it can't just be emergency all the time, right? At some time we have to govern just how we're going to govern, and the economy is just going to have to adjust. And that was one thing eventually people are going to start making different decisions when it comes, in his context, like gasoline consumption, right? People are going to forego the annual family road trip. They're going to forego they're going to find ways to carpool to work. They're going to change their habits, because once prices remain so high, that becomes the practical thing to do. You can only absorb the price hikes for so long before people start changing their behaviors.
Well, and I think it'll be interesting if it affects the way people they're purchasing of vehicles. I mean, are we going to have less Escalades, less big old pickups being sold here, and maybe some smaller electric vehicle type things
Maybe.
going on.
And if that's if
I
that's
would
what
also
happens,
suggest
let
that,
the market drive it.
but I would also suggest, Burgum, when he came into office, talked a lot about walkability and condensed neighborhoods and that kind of stuff. I will tell you, Rob, the high gas prices don't actually affect Aaron and I that much unless we travel, because both of our offices are within 10 blocks, daycare is within 5 blocks. And I know we're unique in North Dakota where we live long ways away from people, but I just wonder if that doesn't get people thinking more about where they live, what they buy in terms of vehicles, those kind of things.
Well, there's a lot more opportunities for that. I'm in the same boat. I work from home. So
yeah,
my big old SUV, I don't have to drive that much. I probably fill up on fuel once a month. So
but it's the same as your mortgage when you do.
yeah. Well, yeah. I don't want to talk about that. Yeah. Last time I filled it up was like $120.
So Rob, I want to tell you a story from 4th of July.
All right, let's hear it.
So the O bands went over to the Mandan 4th of July parade, as we do many years. Beautiful parade, beautiful day because it wasn't very hot, which, as you can imagine, agrees with me. And as we're waiting for the parade to start, 2 young men, probably 14 or 15, come by and they hand me 2 stickers. And the stickers say, "Let's Go Brandon" on them. And so I stopped them and I said, "What does this mean? What does 'Let's Go Brandon' mean?" And they said, "Oh, we can't say, you need to look it up." And I said, "No, just tell me what it means." And they said, "Nope, we can't say those words. You need to look it up on the internet." And so finally Aaron jumped in and said, "No, we know what it means, but if you're handing out these stickers, why can't you say it? Why can't you say what this means?" I think this was, so some parents sent their 13-year-old kids up and down the parade route with stickers that indicate F you to the President of the United States. These kids handing out the stickers weren't comfortable even saying these words because they weren't old enough to say it. But this is what our politics have become. I despise "Let's Go Brandon" maybe more than anything in our whole political realm right now, because I think it synthesizes what's going on in this country. It's silly, it's not funny, and somehow people think it's the most clever thing in the world. And I just want to go to the parade and get tutti fruities and be left alone. I'll shake a politician's hand, but I don't need to hear that we should tell the president to F off. Mind you, I also see bumper stickers that say F you, Donald Trump. I hate those as well.
Yeah.
But we have to do better, and we have to teach our kids better that we shouldn't tell presidents, if you like them or not, that they should F off.
So that's the symptom of the problem, right? Where we are seeing a decline in not just trust but respect for institutions. And I think it starts with "Let's Go Brandon," or I remember back George W. Bush was Chimpy McHitler Burton and all this horrible things. Mitt Romney was a plutocratic, misogynistic
dog killer.
Dog killer. Barack Obama, was a secret Muslim, and all this stuff. It's been with us for a while. Remember, Dan Quayle, whatever you wanted to think about him, was an honorable person. Right? Didn't have any scandals or anything like that.
Just made the one big mistake.
And he misspelled potato. And he got and the thing is, the news media did it too. It's like, we're going to portray this guy as being stupid. He was not a stupid person. He wasn't probably as savvy a politician as maybe he could have been, but he wasn't stupid. But yet that's how we portrayed him, because that satisfied a certain, partisan appetite for, frankly, hating the people on the other side of the aisle. And I think the internet era, years ago, I went to a blogging convention, right? If you can imagine.
God, I bet that was a good time.
A nerdier event. It was actually a lot of fun for a dork like me. But it was, I remember that there was this one session, and this was right at the dawn of, this is how long I've been blogging. This was at the dawn of like Twitter, right? Twitter was a new thing. Facebook even was still a relatively a new thing. And so they were talking about, strategies for communicating on these platforms and how to use them to get people to read your work and stuff. And somebody in one of the panels said that in the future, the American public, the only way to get them to pay attention to a message was to put it on a cat meme. And I thought at the time that this person was joking, but I don't think so anymore, right? There's not, people don't care about this stuff. They don't, and that bothered me. I have always respected. I remember because after years ago, I started writing about politics in the George W. Bush era, and it bothered me the people who said they were going to move to Canada because George W. Bush got reelected, and he wasn't. He was selected, not elected, and he was a war criminal, and all these horrible things that were not true, and I thought is unpatriotic. And I remember I was on the radio with Scott Hennon, of all people, because I was working for him at the time. And I was on the radio election night when Barack Obama won in 2008. And I said that night, he's my president. He's my president. And I'm going to spend the next however many years disagreeing with him and trying to punch a hole in his arguments. But I said it that night, he is my president and I respect the office. And there is not enough of that going around right now. And it bothers me as much as it bothers you. I mean, Donald Trump, let's face it, got, his first sort of at least in the modern, his first entree into politics was the birther stuff against Barack Obama. And what was he feeding? What was an appetite for people who just wanted to hate Barack Obama. And by the way, on that note, I got a really interesting email from somebody, a conservative Republican person who's not a Trump person, who was saying, he doesn't understand, sort of the Christian, the moral, family values right, being so enamored with Donald Trump, who's a serial adulterer, who has a whole galaxy of behavior that wouldn't, but yet these same people hated Barack Obama, who, whatever you think of his policies, I didn't like Barack Obama's policies. By all outward appearances, is a wonderful father, yep, in a very solid, good marriage. And I say that with somebody who didn't particularly like. I mean, this is not me saying I didn't like Barack Obama the politician, but I'll tell you, I always smiled when I saw pictures of him. And like I think there was one where he's like in a bumper car with his daughters, and he's smiling, and everybody's smiling, having a good time, and that just warmed my heart because I thought, what a wonderful dad.
Yeah, because here's the thing: Barack Obama would be a fun hang. I think he'd be fun to hang out with.
I think George W. Bush would be fun to hang out with.
I agree with that as well. But here's the concerning thing to me about sort of the Trump, the Let's Go Brandon thing. There was also like mock-ups of Trump like riding in the back of the car at parades. The sort of cult of personality that goes along with Trump. And you wrote about it. The January 6th commission does matter, and it should matter, and people should pay attention to this stuff. But it doesn't seem to be seeping in. And like it makes me nervous when Trump can't do anything wrong for probably 50% of North Dakotans. And that doesn't bode well for our future, that this guy literally could do. I mean, it was him that said he could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue or whatever, and it wouldn't. I mean,
he was right.
He wasn't wrong.
Right.
I mean, he was not wrong.
Anyway. That does bother me. I think I wrote in a column not that long ago that I could never belong to a political movement that is organized around a person instead of ideas. And I think what I was trying to express there was that I believe very much in the institutions of our country. I believe very much in the process. And like partisanship is never going to allow me to say that it's okay to try to infiltrate Congress and lynch the vice president because you didn't win an election. I cannot condone that. I cannot look the other way. I can't. I love my country. I will never love my country more, or I'll never love a politician more than I love my country. And even some of the stuff we're seeing right now where people don't like the Supreme Court rulings that came down. And now they're saying, I'm going to move to Great Britain. I'm going to move to Canada. We got to blow up the system. We got to do all this stuff. That is crazy talk.
But Rob, I think with the choice issue, if people feel unsafe in the country they're living in or the state, they're living in, I mean, I don't. Who am I to judge if they want to?
Oh, don't start making excuses for it. And I understand there's a lot of reactions. There's been a whole galaxy of reactions. I'm talking about some of the more extreme ones. And listen, if you want to move to Canada, fine. I don't think it makes a lot of sense, because how do you change things in America from Canada? You can't. So, as a practical matter, I don't think it makes a lot of sense. But the people saying, we got to get rid of the Supreme Court, or we got to do all these things. No, what you got to do is you got to vote, and you got to engage in the political process and make the law read what you want it to read.
Yeah, I think what's interesting right now is the amount of Democrats saying we did vote. We got majorities in both chambers. We got the president of the United States, and there's nothing being done. I mean, I think that's what's really interesting. I don't want to hear about telling me to vote. We've done that in the past, and we haven't gotten what we've won.
Well, I think part of the problem, though, is that liberals kind of hung their hats on winning policy debates in courts and not in legislatures.
Yeah,
and I think that's biting you right now.
Rob, that was last week's podcast. Okay. We got to move on to something.
Okay.
What else is going on in the world, Rob?
Well, I think this 4th of July stuff, I think it was really interesting, the number of people who were reacting to the 4th of July. I saw I'm forgetting the actress name, but she was on Twitter giving, this is what I think of the 4th of July, and giving double middle fingers. I mean, to me, that's at the same intellectual level as Let's Go Brandon.
Yeah. I will tell you, speaking of 4th of July, there was a rather large group at the state capitol for fireworks that were protesting on the pro-choice side of things. And it was amazing. I mean, I bet it was 150, 200 people, obviously standing, not in the Capitol grounds because that was already permitted, but people standing up for what they believed in a really, really peaceful, great way. I mean, cheering as cars went by and beeped as they went by. I can get down with that. I can get down. I mean, it was peaceful, good conversation. There's no screaming back and forth. That's what it's supposed to look like.
Yeah, and I don't have a problem with any of that. I don't have a problem with people being upset about the Supreme Court ruling. Yep. I have a problem with people saying, problem with people threatening justices about it. I have a problem with people also saying that we just blow up the system because it produced a result we don't like. It's not how it works.
Well, and I also think it's interesting, the folks who are saying let's blow up the system, and I understand frustration. It wasn't just the abortion one last week. There's a lot of them that I didn't like, but we knew this was coming. I mean, this wasn't like any of this should be surprising.
You and I, people like you and I knew it was coming because we pay attention. A lot of the people reacting, let's be honest, are checked out fair. Most of the time.
Yeah, that's fair. But we knew when all these justices got appointed, and I know you and I disagree what they said at their hearings, but what I thought they said was never believable to me anyway on precedent in Roe v. Wade.
Well, and listen, if you want to play that game, I heard Elena Kagan and Justice Sotomayor say that they respect the Second Amendment and the court's precedents on that, but that doesn't stop them from voting against those. So, I mean, if you want to, and the thing is I don't begrudge them what they said, right? The politicians were basically asking them to decide hypothetical cases in a Senate Judiciary hearing, and they shouldn't be doing that. It would be inappropriate if they did. So they said that the Second Amendment is important. Well, the Second Amendment is more than just precedent. It is the law written there. But, I mean, they talked about respecting Second Amendment precedent, and I knew exactly how they would vote once they were on the court, and that's fine. I don't begrudge them that, and I don't think we should begrudge conservative justices for having a conservative view that the law should be what it is written and not what we want it to be. I was just writing a column about this, going back. I mean, the concept of writing down laws, it doesn't seem like an innovation, but it was basically invented in Mesopotamia 4,000 years ago. But the idea that we're going to write the law down, so first of all, it's predictable. We all know what the law is. Those of us who are expected to follow the law can read the law and understand what it is. But also, it can't just be changed on the whim of a monarch, right? And so, to me, that's very, very important. You enforce the law as written. If you don't like what's written in our system, change it. But otherwise, the court shouldn't be saying, well, the law means this now. Like this whole living Constitution thing. Yes, the Constitution is living, but if you want to change it, you change it through the legislative process, not through we just have a new generation of courts who are going to interpret things differently. That's not how it should work.
I don't know what to say to all that, Rob. That was just a lot. I agree. We should write down laws.
Yeah. Oh, gosh.
Hey, one other thing on 4th of July. I don't know if you saw any of the footage of down in Highland Park,
Terrible.
Illinois.
Yeah.
I mean, literally, that could be any street USA, looking at. I mean, that's what my family was doing in the morning of the 4th of July, right?
Yeah.
Sitting, watching it's just
it's hard. It's so disappointing, and I think you and I agree that this is a problem. But I think one area where I really struggle is what can we do in terms of law? Like what does the law solve? And so the fact that this happened in Illinois, Illinois has a red flag law. They've had one for a while. They have a permitting system for purchasing and owning guns. They have universal background checks. That's an Illinois law. They have Highland Park specifically has bans on assault weapons and high-capacity magazines. They have since 2013. Concealed carry was prohibited at the parade. So, this I think is where we run in to a problem. Is we have all these debates about what the law should be. And then we run into the problem that the only people who follow the law are people who aren't criminals.
right.
And I really struggle with that. So much so I've been reading too this wonderful book, and I'm going to completely the book is just called Columbine, and it was written 10 years after obviously that seminal. Obviously it wasn't the first mass shooting, but I think it was maybe the first of this sort of modern template for the mass shooting.
Well, and it was one of the first big school shootings.
Right. Well, it was hugely influential, and the author writes about how it served as a template for the disaffected. And he was talking about how like the FBI and they've tried to develop a profile of who is the mass shooter. And they're really, other than the fact that most of them are male, overwhelmingly, there is no profile, right? They come from different backgrounds. They have different motivations. They have different whatever. There's no pattern. And I don't, as a practical matter, right, the fact that Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold invented this template that is now playing out over and over again, even to the point where like the Virginia Tech shooter, referenced them and his man. I mean, Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold get referenced by these people over and over again. I don't know how we combat that as law.
Yeah, but and just the humanity of it. I mean, the 2-year-old who was left as an orphan because both of her parents got or his parents, and he was wandering around. And I heard stories about the shooter had a bunch of swords and knives and stuff confiscated from him back in 2019, and then his dad went and got him back from the police. I mean, again. Red flag laws only work as if somebody's reporting that these folks are having problems. And sometimes I think we don't want to admit those closest to us are struggling in that kind of thing, unless we feel. And this young man, he dressed as a woman in order to get away. I mean, the other
he'd been planning it for a while.
Yeah, for weeks. And I also see, I do get frustrated that, this guy shot how many people, and then he's, nicely taken into custody by the police, and other traffic stops. It just, I don't know. It all just makes me sick, top to bottom. And then not to mention the little girl who passed away at the Mandan Parade this weekend as well. I don't know if you heard about that.
Well, yeah, which was not a shooting.
Let's be clear.
Horrible accident. She fell off a float.
I think, Rob, overall, what I'm just doing, I'm using this more as a counseling session for me to talk about all the things that have me sad.
It was it was a rough holiday. I'm the same way. I'm sad about the state of our country. I'm sad. I think we need. I read a columnist that that said maybe and this is really hard to admit in politics because you can't hold elected office unless you get votes from Americans. But I really worry that we need a better class of American right now, who believes in our institutions and who has respect for the other side, even as we're disagreeing. We have got to raise our game a little bit as Americans.
When Rob, I would say not even necessarily respect for the other side. That might be a bridge too far. Have some expectation for your side to be better. Don't accept Donald Trump as your guy.
You're preaching to the choir, man.
Yeah, no, I know. But it just seems to me, "Let's go, Brandon," should not be this country's motto and the rationale for the next president of the United States. And I hope it gets better, but I fear all the way through 2024. I mean, like we said last week, Donald, just go away, man. Just go away.
I worry that we're going to hit a rock bottom. Although I am starting to hear more and more when the pro-Trump people send me emails, they're trying to say, well, I'm not really a Trump guy anymore. I'm more of a Ron DeSantis guy, something. I see some hope in that, even though I'm not really all that enthusiastic about Ron DeSantis. I think at least he's somebody who's going to keep it in the guardrails, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's an honest development. Hey, one other thing I wanted to bring up, because I think when we talked about this in the context of the abortion debate and the fact that these laws, these trigger laws, and even right and left, right, they're going to become real policy now. Right? They're not hypothetical anymore. They're going to become a real policy. So in Ohio, we have a situation where very young, was the girl 11, and got pregnant and had to cross state lines because she couldn't get an abortion in Ohio. 10-year-old, 11-year-old. I think we're going to have a lot of instances, and I'm wondering what this is going to do, given how much of our politics is shaped by the abortion issue. I wonder what that's going to do for our politics when anecdotes like that are staring us in the face now. Where if you want to continue to sort this, you have to accept that a 10-year-old girl who, by definition of the law, was raped.
Yep.
Has to have cannot terminate the pregnancy. That's going to be staring people in the face, and you can't run away from it anymore. It's not a hypothetical anymore.
Yep, and we talked about last week about the potential effects of this in congressional races around the country, and I think it will. I will tell you, I'm not going to go into names, but there was 4 or 5 older women that were together when this ruling came out. 3 of the 5 were Republicans. Only 1 agreed with the ruling. So 2 Republican women in their 60s were terrified what this meant. Does that make them vote for a Democrat, or is inflation the bigger issue? I mean, I think it goes. I mean, it's hard to say at this point.
It's going to be complicated.
To Kent's, because you're going to get a cheeseburger and it costs you $20. That's a reminder every time of the frustration around inflation.
That's pretty. And the one thing too that frustrates me about the way is people again keep seeing the Supreme Court ruling through the lens of whether or not they think abortion should be legal, and I continue to think that's the wrong lens to look at it. The ruling was the Constitution is neutral on the question of abortion. This is an issue to be settled by legislatures and states at that level. It's not an issue for the courts to decide. It drives me. I wish more people would understand that. That's what the court said. That's what the ruling said. If you want abortion to be legal, talk to your state legislature.
Well, Rob, I would say you shouldn't play poker, because every time I talk about my position on abortion, I can tell your face doesn't like when I talk about it in those.
Hey, I wear my feelings on my sleeve.
Yeah,
and listen, that's how I think it's important. I think it's an important distinction, and it gets back to everything I'm saying about process, right? The process matters. We have a process for making
in real life. If you're a person who had what they saw as a civil right over your autonomy of your body, and now you don't have that anymore, depending on where you live, I think you're wanting people to have this sort of discussion about the process and all that. maybe we'll get there, but for now, I've got a lot of grace for those people who are angry and hurt.
I do too. But I think the argument that you and I consistently make is we've got to cool things down. We have to be more rational about these things. That's my argument. I am looking at the opinion rationally. I understand people are upset, and I understand. I mean, I look at that situation in Ohio, and I mean, I'm a dad, right? That's terrible. That's a terrible, terrible thing to be faced with. So I get the emotional side of it, but I also think I want to turn the thermostat down across the board. We can't all just be driven by emotion anymore, and we have to stop making excuses for people who are.
Yeah, but I also think giving people time to get through the emotional side of things. I mean, it's been a week, man. I think that as he shakes his head, still not playing poker.
Yeah, well, no, I know. I mean, I like to think that's one of the nice things about me is you don't really have to guess a lot where I'm at.
Yep.
But yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's tough. I have all the empathy in the world for people who feel passionately about these things. I feel passionately about these things. I mean, I have to tamp down my feelings too. I have to struggle with them as well, the same as everybody else. But at the end of the day, we have to respect the rule of law. We have to respect the process. And if you don't like the law, you don't like the process, we have the means through which you could change it. That's what we have to engage in. So anyway, we're coming up on the time. Any last thoughts, Chad?
No last thoughts. Good discussion. I hope next 4th of July is better than the one that we just experienced.
I agree. Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll be back again on Friday. I don't know. I don't even know who I'm going to interview on Friday, but it'll be somebody. So tune in. Thanks for listening.
See ya.
Did you know Forum Communications Company has a robust podcast library? At inforum.com/podcasts, we have everything from politics, sports, true crime, outdoor adventure, and more. Visit inforum.com/podcasts and explore them all today.